Just to change the subject for just a second, I'd like to condemn CPAC for bringing Go Pride to this event. Bring it, bring it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Guess what? Guess what? All right? Guess what? Civil rights are grounded in natural rights. Natural rights are grounded in human nature. Human nature is a rational substance in relationship. The intelligible end of the reproductive act is reproduction. Do you understand that? Civil rights, when they conflict with natural rights, are contrary. Now you sit down. The lesbians at Smith College protest better than you do. The lesbians at Smith College protest better than you do. All right? Bring it. Yeah, I was invited by, I'm the California chairman for Young Americans for Freedom, so I was invited to go just be on a youth panel. It was just basically supposed to be about youth victories across the nation. And my original speech was going to be about how my friend Brendan Steinhauser at FreedomWorks started the entire Tea Party movement by turning FreedomWorks chapters into Tea Party groups. I was going to talk about how I helped helped Lila Rose get her club Live Action started at UCLA when it was forming along with James O'Keefe and the kind of effect that Lila Rose's group has had. I was going to talk about how Steve Bierfeld, my friend from the Leadership Institute, actually changed the laws at airports when TSA was bullying him around. I was going to talk about how Hannah Giles and James O'Keefe and I helped in the San Bernardino Acorn investigation shut down Acorn. And so I was going to, basically just make a quick speech about how, conservative youth activism is where the conservative movement needs to focus, and for these huge reasons. So anyway, I'm getting ready to give this, other speech, and then this kid who is, I call him a pseudo-conservative, and a pseudo-conservative is a conservative who works against one or more factions of he works against one or more conservative issues, but works toward none of them, or barely works toward one of them. And this kid, Alexander McCobin from Students for Liberty, which Mr. Kincaid actually talked about it during his presentation, our libertine group, housed at the Cato Institute, which is in part funded by George Soros, and I learned that from Mr. Kincaid. This kid, Alexander McCobin, gets up, and instead of giving a speech about, youth victories across the nation, he changes the subject completely. And this is what the homosexual pro-sodomy activists did in the 70s with the American Psychiatric Association. They would disrupt meetings, they would change subjects, they would not stop bringing it up until people just said, we're sick of hearing them protest, so we're going to give them their way. They want to wear people out. It's a struggle of will with them. You have to out-will them. And so he gets up and he changes the subject completely. He says, I'd like to thank CPAC for inviting Go Pride. He misquoted the name of the group, and then I ended up misquoting it. It's Go Proud. He called it Go Pride. I'd like to thank CPAC for bringing Go Pride to this event, and it really shows that CPAC supports liberty. Well, great speech, Mr. McCobin. He's supposedly going to school for some advanced degree, but it's the entire speech in and of itself is a self-contradiction. Why? Because CPAC is a private organization. They therefore have the liberty to invite or disinvite anybody that they want. So they'd be supporting liberty just as well by disinviting the group. And so his entire speech in and of itself was a contradiction. But, one of my core issues since I got started in politics was defense of the institution of the family and religious liberty. So if I'm sitting on the same panel as this kid and I just sit there and say nothing, it's like, what kind of an activist am I? What kind of cowardness does that show that I'm too afraid, to even respond to this kid? So while he was saying, I'd like to thank GoPro, I was booing from my seat. And, boo. And then I got up, and a couple of the Go Proud infiltrators, centrist Republicans, there's this guy named Ramon Buehler who runs the Republican Majority PAC, and he actually tried to recruit me when I was in college by way of one of his guys. When I was at Cal State San Bernardino, he sent a field rep to recruit me to protest at the California Republican Convention in favor of, quote, pro-choice, pro-environment Republicans.
And he had this whole method by which to infiltrate the California Republican Party. He wanted us to get these liberal Republicans, he called them South Park Republicans, and he wanted us to get seats at in the local Republican groups, and then he wanted us to get votes on the Central Committee board based on, supposedly having all these numbers, and then to take the party over from the inside by supporting this liberalism. And so this was his goal, and he yelled at us at dinner for an hour about making this happen, and none of us were, we ended up going, and we basically said, well, we don't want this guy bringing legitimate liberals to the convention, so we're going to go. We're not going to do any of his activism, and he's going to waste his money, and we're just going to hang out and promote social conservatism. So that's what we ended up doing. And anyway, so these are the guys that are the Go Proud, the Cato Institute Republicans. They're these Ramon Buehler, South Park Republican, pro-gay, pro-baby murder, pro-global warming Republicans. Half of them are socialists posing as conservatives. And they're out there, like a couple of them are booing me as I get up to come to the podium. And then I get up there and I say, I'd like to condemn CPAC for bringing Go Pride to this event. And then I said, and then some kid said, civil rights, civil rights. And I said, civil rights are grounded in natural rights. Natural rights are grounded in human nature. Human nature is, in sum, a rational substance in relationship, or a rational animal. That's what we are. And the intelligible or rational end of the reproductive organ and act is reproduction. And if I hadn't been being yelled at, I would have been able to finish at the secondary intelligible end of the reproductive act is a unity of spouses in the interest of the education of the rational being or beings begotten as a result of that union. But just then a bunch of them started yelling, sit down. So then I said, you sit down. Guess what? The lesbians at Smith College protest better than you guys do. They're supposed to be so big and bad by protesting me at CPAC. Well, guess what? You guys really aren't that great of protesters. And, the perception was that everybody was booing because there was this sort of faction of Ron Paul libertine anarcho-capitalists and geo-proud people and people that go visit Burning Man and do pagan rituals in the desert. Here at CPAC, because David Keene invited them and his henchwoman Lisa De Pasquale invited them, and Ron Paul and Jeff Frazee. And it's like, I don't care if you guys boo me. You guys aren't not the conservative movement. You guys are we were protesting you a couple of years ago when you were this, huge anti-war faction, and you're anti-war communist. You guys were with them. And by way of Ron Paul, you've now come to us, and thanks for voting Republican, but you're not going to take over the party. That's it. But yeah, exactly. So anyways, after I had the speech, I kind of felt some anxiety. I sat down, I was like, whoa, what's going to happen because of this? I mean, I just walked right off stage. I wasn't going to sit up there, And I walked out into the hall, and immediately I'm greeted by like some group of people that want to like shake my hand, like, thank you for what you were doing. And when you look at the YouTube video, there are a bunch of people applauding. You hear the boos and clapping, but there were a bunch of people applauding, and a lot of people didn't even realize what was going on, and so they were kind of quiet. But anyway, so a little after that, I was approached by this kid, Alex Nepper, and Alex Nepper believes that it is okay to rape a girl if she walks to your house with you when it's dark. He believes that implicit in her act of walking with a man is the notion that she wants to therefore have sex, and therefore he can go forward and rape her. And that's his position. He's open about it. The kid's nuts. So he approaches me in the hall, and then he, out of memorization, creates this sort of like semi-fictitious interview and posts it on, the Moral Paragon, Andrew Sullivan's website, and where it's on the internet now. But this is the kind of guy that this Andrew Sullivan runs with. They'll come up with any sideways argument in order to try to make you look bad or to try to make their position look good. But, they won't just tell you what they're really up to. Like the speaker before me said, it's not about the Bible for these people, about whether or not the Bible condemns or condones homosexuality. It's just about the fact that they want the Bible to fit their preconceived ideological notions. So anyways, that was what happened at CPAC. Since then, I've been offered a remote apprenticeship with the Family Research Council. I was invited to come here and speak for Americans for Truth Academy with Pete LaBarbera. I now work for another fiscally conservative national nonprofit organization. Joseph Farah from WorldNet Daily invited me to write columns for his website. And so, you know, a ton of great things have happened. And our Young American for Freedom chapter in California has grown. We've got new members. Everybody's motivated as ever. Young Americans for Liberty have sort of, I haven't heard from them as much since then. And Alexander McCobin has just done some, you know, quiet corner of the internet promoting homosexuality, supposedly as a conservative. And we really haven't heard much from him. But we have heard from Go Proud. And, you know, I was pretty sad when I saw that Andrew Breitbart, I was part of the Acorn investigation that made the guy famous, you know, that made the guy have the influence that he has today. I went into the San Bernardino Acorn office with James and Hannah and put myself on the line to make this Acorn investigation happen. And then Breitbart sticks some guy, Bruce Carroll, the treasurer of Go Proud, on his website to condemn what I did at CPAC. And you know, it made me sick. And then, you know, hotair.com, their lead blogger paints the entire Hot Air blog pink, and it looks like a gay parade on the website for a couple of hours after CPAC. And so anyways, their tactics are pathetic. It's the same thing as the Tea Partiers are called racists, and they call us hateful bigots, that sort of thing. A lot of the libertarians have you know, I've heard that one practical method by which to deal with the claim, like, oh, you're racist, oh, you hate, is to just call them the same name back, and then the public throws their arms up, and the attack is neutralized. And to be honest, I actually think they do hate Christians. I do think they hate Christian morality. And I asked the protesters in front of the CNN cameras, do you hate Christians? Do you hate us? And one guy, and a couple people said, yes, we hate you. And hopefully the CNN guys don't edit that from their film. But they said, yes, we hate you. Yeah, I know. So and we've got film of that anyways on our own, so we can always put it up. But anyway, so that's what happened at CPAC. Go Proud is now having Ann Coulter speak at their conference, which I think it's terrible that she's going there, because by going there she's giving them credibility. And I don't know how much actual intellectual credibility Ann Coulter has, but she's a political entertainer, and you know, she's got a large following of people that, you know, read political books for fun, kind of like Michael Savage books and that sort of thing. But so she is influential for those, you know, newly coming into the movement. And if you've got, you know, college freshmen, sophomores, juniors who are young and have looked up to Ann Coulter, and they see that she's going to the Go Proud event, whatever she says at the Go Proud event is going to be irrelevant. They're going to be in control of the cameras and what gets released. But those kids are going to look and say, oh, well, Ann Coulter's okay with the Go Proud, so I'm okay with Go Proud, because, you know, that's something that's then okay. So that's terrible. She should definitely change her mind on that. I hope she does. If she doesn't, I guess we've just got to write her off as another traitor to conservatism. So anyway, that's what happened at CPAC and Go Proud and Ann Coulter. I guess now I'll open up just for general questions other than Pete's questions. Oh yeah, Smith College. So I get invited. I was the National Director of Membership and Campus Leadership for the Intercollegiate Studies Institute at the time, and I met a couple of students from Smith College at the Leadership Institute, and the president of the college Republicans there invited me to come and give a lecture on the Born Gay hoax, the one that I gave Thursday here at Smith. So I agreed. You know, they paid my travel, gave me an honorarium and everything. So, you know, they put a huge banner like Ryan Sorba, the Born Gay hoax, coming to Smith, and they have this, like, it's a bridge that goes across their quad, and they hung this huge, you know, it's like a sheet that just said, you know, Ryan Sorba's coming, the Born Gay hoax, date, time, room, all that, And then the lesbians started getting on a listserv, the school listserv, like talking about the method by which they're going to protest the lecture. And some of them were talking about, these two girls are going to kiss each other, and then these ones don't agree with that tactic. They were going to turn around their chairs. They're going to put tape over their mouth. And then you had the other ones that were going to like protest, and then the ones that disagreed with them protesting, and then the ones that disagreed, and said we just shouldn't show up to the lecture. So anyway, I get there and it looks like a rock concert or something, like the Backstreet Boys were going to play. There's like, 1,000 girls like crammed into this little Smith library. The podium was about this high because it's an all-girls school. So I'm like peeled over this microphone. And I start giving the lecture, the Born Gay Hoax. And it's quiet for about the first 5-10 minutes, but you can hear, the windows are all shut in the library, but you can hear like bongo drums outside, and you've got like one girl dressed like a fairy, girls with tape, girls sitting backwards, they're all doing, and then you've got the college Republicans like in the first 2 rows, and then all of a sudden one girl gets in and she unlocks the windows to the library. And they just start like flowing in through the windows as I'm giving my speech, and they start like clapping their hands and chanting like, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." And then they start like jumping around the podium and clapping and screaming bloody murder. And then after about a half an hour, the entire place was like chaos. And I just kept speaking. I just kept like giving my speech. And I wanted to get arrested. I said, arrest me for this, so that it gets more publicity and that people see what kind of people you guys are and that you don't want any ideological discussion. Part of the reason they were so afraid of allowing me to just speak was that I had just previously given a speech at Framingham State, and it was extremely successful. The liberal school newspaper, it was pretty much the same speech I gave Thursday, but it included a couple more sections. The school newspaper gave me a positive write-up. Mass Resistance wrote, blockbuster speech, the Born Gay Hoax, and there was virtually, no negativity that came out of that event when I was just allowed to give the speech and answer questions. And so they just wanted to shut it down because they were afraid. And then anyway, it ended up on ABC 7 News and then Breitbart TV, and that was about it. But the college Republicans came up and they're like, please, we don't want it to go any further. So I said, okay. So then the school security brought us into a room behind the podium that's sort of like this cubbyhole secret room in the library, and they kept us locked in there for a half an hour. And then I'm just like, give me a break. And then we ended up going out. We went and filed an incident report or whatever, and then that was it. We just went home. But I've given a ton of other speeches since on other campuses, but it was a pretty wild day. Yeah, and it almost looks like it was a Backstreet Boys concert if you didn't know any better. I mean, there's a bunch of screaming girls running around, but anyway, I mean, it was pathetic. Their tactics were pathetic, and if you just expose that, it's a win-win, because if I'm able to give my speech from start to finish, you're gonna change minds, you're gonna open minds. You might not change them immediately. You got to plant the seed. They're not going to comprehend everything immediately. They're going to catch one or two things. It's going to make, maybe not very much sense to hear it again. It makes a little more sense, and then the idea just grows in their own head, and it all begins to fit together. But if I give the speech, it's a win. And if they protest, it just brings more publicity to my ideas. And a rough draft of my book, an old rough draft, is on the internet right now, so anybody can Google the Born Gay Hoax and get it all. So it just brings more publicity and gives me a larger platform by which to promote my ideas. So for the next time. So that's Smith.
Ryan, could you give us, as best you can, sort of an objective analysis of where you see young people, your generation, their attitudes on homosexuality, and also the ones who call themselves conservative?
On average, I'd say that they're more tolerant and more apathetic in general. I'm not talking about the political students or anything. I think that anybody in their living room, they don't want to have a person that identifies in that way over for dinner. They don't want to, associate with them or be around them. That hasn't changed much. What's changed is that they feel like they're going to be harassed or demonized if they come out against it publicly. And, the Carrie Parisian thing, they made an example out of her. You know what I mean? They like to make examples out of people so that if anybody else thinks about, being the nail that sticks up, they're going to get hammered down. So, I mean, I think that one of the, the number one young demographic that we've got to worry about are college-age girls, because they make friends with these homosexual males and they're their besties, and they go around with them and they feel like they're going to defend their friend, and these homosexual organizations bring these homosexuals in and train them about how to create fake sob stories. Tell them you're from a Christian home, you had a normal upbringing, you played sports, and then tell them that you just couldn't resist it one day and you had to come out and it was a traumatic experience. Make up this same sob. I've heard this same thing a million times, and after I kept hearing about it, I started researching it, and I found out that they actually teach them to say this same thing. And next time you hear it, just realize that it's the same story that every single one of them gives. But if you really ask them, like, hey, what happened to you? What happened? Not all of them, but a large percentage of them. Like we were at the beach on Independence Day having a bonfire, and a girl, some girls came up and they sat by our bonfire, and come to find out she's a lesbian or whatever, and then we start kind of having a little quick debate, and I said, what happened? What happened? And then she pulled me aside and said that her brother's friends gang raped her when she was like 5, and I was like, wow, and that's what she's dealing with in her head. And, she was lower socioeconomic status. She's like, I ain't a promoter, and I know, there's something else for me, but right now I can't, and you feel bad for them. But this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people that have been hurt, people that have, disorders, people that are in denial, and their friends are in the closet of co-denial with them. They're in denial from the fact that they aren't born this way, that they do have the ability to change. Some of them will still struggle with it, but they ultimately do have the ability to overcome it. And like Ellen DeGeneres, her stepdad attempted to molest her multiple times. Prior to that, she was attracted to men. Her mom's autobiography notes that she was attracted to men, but her and her mother claim she was born gay, and she's in denial about the fact that she wasn't born gay, and her mother is codependent on that denial because she doesn't want to face the fact that her stepfather, the woman that she brought into the home, attempted to molest her own daughter, and although she knows that and is grieved about it, she can't conceptualize her own daughter as not being normal. And so she has to come up with some rationalization for why her daughter is engaging these behaviors that won't, condemn her. So,
Ryan, can you comment specifically on libertarianism and youth?
Yeah, libertarianism is this. It's liberty is the golden mean between legalism and license. You could call legalism like maybe communism, and license anarchy. And libertarianism is licentiousness, and it's like the step before total anarchy. And liberty is the freedom from injustice and the freedom to do any just thing. That's what liberty is. You don't have the liberty to do any unjust thing. So that when I talk to libertarians, about that, they don't tend to argue with me. Like, we don't have the liberty to do any unjust thing, but what can or can the government not regulate? Like, we do things that are immoral all the time that the government may or may not regulate. And, I say, well, the feds overturned Lawrence v. Texas, which was previously the state's right. And then they'll agree with me, okay, Lawrence v. Texas is bad because it took away from states' rights. So I can get them with me on advocating the repeal of Lawrence. And then I say, as a state, states have the constitutional powers, police powers to regulate health and safety and morality. They do. The states have that power. And so the states are within their power to enact anti-sodomy laws if it's by a rational law to inhibit the spread of bad morality, bad public health, or bad public safety. So then I can get the libertarians on our side by way of those arguments. And whenever the conversation is able to play itself out, I win. Same thing with with this notion that homosexuals are 100% biologically determined, that they're meat puppets again, dangling from the strings of chemical reactions in their brains. When I bring it to them that way, then they tend to say, well, they don't like to make broad generalizations. They don't like to make sweeping claims. So I say, so you're saying it's 100% genetic and that they're just robots? I say, well, no, we're not saying that. So there is environment involved. And they're saying, well, and then you crack, kick open that crack that you just created in the door. And then they start citing, studies. And I let them cite a study, and then I debunk that study. Like if they cite Dean Hammer's gay gene study, I note that he was charged with research improprieties by the NIH's Office for Research Integrity because a junior researcher turned him in for excluding pairs of brothers that contradicted his pre-planned experimental outcome. They bring up the Bailey-Pillard study. They excluded their control group, in which non-related brothers were homosexual more often than were identical twin brothers. And then I'll let them bring up the hypothalamus. They always bring up the gay brain study. Simon LeVay admitted that his study proved nothing, was inconclusive. He compared the brains of 13 men whose sexual orientation he didn't know to the brains of 19 men whose sexual orientation he didn't know. None of these studies are repeatable. They'll bring up hormone studies, and then I'll debunk those, and then I'll start saying, what are you going to do? Bring up next the finger length study or the eye blink study? They're ridiculous on their face. And then they start feeling like, uh-oh. And, the Ron Paulers, the libertarians, they like Ron Paul because they're young idealists. And, Washington's full of young idealists and old cynics, or, that old saying. Well, Ron Paul's sort of an older idealist, and these young people relate to him because they're young idealists. But, Ron Paul comes out with a confidence that, most people can't compete with. He just comes out there like he knows it all, like he's got the answer for everything. So when you hit him with that same sort of, and you've got to be humble and you've got to acknowledge that you don't know everything, but when you come out there with that same sort of idealistic stance, these libertarians, you'll find, will start to buckle at the knees and start, fading from Ron Paul. So that's sort of the strategy I've been taking with the libertarians. So far I've been winning, Facebook debates or email exchange debates. Frank Kameny has agreed to debate me, so we're looking for a venue for that in Washington. So
Kameny is?
Frank Kameny is the co-founder of the Washington Mattachine Society. He's basically the oldest, most experienced pro-gay activist in America after Harry Hay died. And he's in favor of sex with minors.
Wait a minute. He spoke at a NAMBLA meeting, and we found a NAMBLA document which mentioned that Frank Kameny appeared there. Then we wrote him, because I exchanged correspondence with him over the years. We actually interviewed him for 5 hours once. And he said that he doesn't remember whether he spoke. He can't recollect if he and what he said. So it's sort of an odd defense. He can't remember if he spoke at a meeting organized by men who advocate legalizing sex between men and children and boys. So that's bizarre. He also wrote AFTA once to say that he says that bestiality is okay as long as the animal doesn't mind. So he's this old octogenarian. Also, an interesting thing I was telling Cliff about, Hay makes a lot of his firing from the federal government, but apparently he worked for, I can't remember which federal department, but he was apparently arrested for lewd conduct in parks, in the park across from the White House, Lafayette Park. And I think, the reason all this is important is that if there's ever a Gay History Month, what are they going to do? Just like they're teaching now, they're teaching the mayor of Castro Street, what's his name? Harvey Milk. They will teach Frank Kameny, and they will teach him as a hero, sort of like.
So I want to get him.
Martin
I want to
Luther
get him on. I want to debate with him, bring up these claims, debate with him about marriage, and then stick it up on YouTube so that when they, if they were to try to do something like this, we've got something up there that we can use on our defense, from when he was still living, a YouTube video. And I actually brought my marriage arguments to his attention over the phone, and he said, but, and that was all he had to say. After I was
the way back, we were going to get to what do you see for young people? Because many obviously have bought into the pro-homosexual propaganda. What's the way back?
The only method by which we're going to make any headway on this is the pro-family movement needs a national field program. like the one the Leadership Institute implements every year. Basically, you've got a national field director, and you can start with like one. You got to give them a full-time salary. It's got to be their full-time job and have a travel budget. And then they've got to be able to build clubs on college campuses. And you've got to shoot for an initial goal of the first year or two of having 100 clubs. And then you've got to get them each to have 4 events, per semester. One of those events should be a speaker event. One of those events should be a recruitment event. One of those events should be a social, and one of those events should be a private meeting with an intellectual of an intellectual nature. So the recruitment event should also be sort of a publicity stunt of some sort in order to generate attention for the club. And if you do that, then you've got 100 clubs, then you can, or 50 clubs, you can get a conference going, and you can bring speakers to that conference, and you can educate them, and then you've got to place them in key positions in government, conservative nonprofits, the press. You've got to place them in key positions, and then you got to maybe locate the ones that want to go on to higher masters and PhDs, and then you can send them to the Intercollegiate Studies Institute where they can give them a scholarship or a grant to help pay for their continued education. And then they're in the university, then they hire their own, and you basically invade and take over from the inside. That's what the left has been doing for years. That's what's happening here. That's what's happening, is they've infiltrated the conservative movement. They're taking it over from the inside out. And you do that by placing your own in positions of power and then having them fill the ranks below them with their own kind. So we're going to actually do that with a local newspaper in my area. We're going to try to get a couple of the students onto the newspaper and then see if we can't get them to recommend other friends to work for the newspaper. We're going to start doing it with heritage interns. There's a couple real liberal there's a real liberal girl from San Diego that just got an internship at the Heritage Foundation. That's terrible. She's got that on her resume, and it just looks good. And they don't know that she's not, a legitimate conservative, but that's what we've got to do. And then you've got to test these people in order to know that they're legitimate conservatives. You got to put them in a position where they've got to make a public statement of some kind that that they're not going to be spineless, that they're going to be able to exist under pressure, and you've got to test them. So we've got some methods by which, we're doing that right now with Cal YAF to figure out, who's good and who's not, and who to promote and in what ways. So, and we've got access to internships all over Washington where we can place them and stuff. But
questions?
We tend to view young people, high school, college age, as if they are simply sponges. They're absorbing everything, and they're not making any judgments. Now, I know from my own days in school that a lot of what was presented to us officially, we'd snicker up